Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session. The topic for this session is Innovating the Edge powered by the cloud. As world is becoming increasingly connected, the edge is becoming the critical component of modern computing. With IoT, 5G, AI driving the exponential growth, innovating the edge has been very critical for the enterprises. Cloud computing has been instrumental for the innovation, enabling organizations to capture, process, and analyze data faster and closer to the source. In today's session, our panel of experts will share their experience, will talk about the use cases in this domain. We'll discuss about the transformative power of edge. We'll also see how the industry is evolving and how edge is being adopted by various enterprises. With this, I would like to invite the panelists and welcome them to the session. Uh, First of all, I'd like to invite Abhishek Biswal, who is the EVP and BP of Airtel Digital Services. Abhishek, if you can join. Yeah. He has led various product and business strategies for Airtel Digital across verticals, including entertainment, OTT, IoT, cloud, and security. Next, I'd like to invite Ram Subramaniam. He's the Vice President of Qualcomm. He has an extensive experience in leading business and IT transformations. Welcome, sir. Next panelist would be Gaurav Sareen. He's a Senior Vice President looking after IoT business for iBus networks and infrastructure. He deeply engaged himself with technologies like IoT, AI, digital twin, deep learning, and machine learning. Next, we have Andrew McGee. He's the Senior Director, Solution Architect at Red Hat. He focuses on architecting next generation open carrier grade solutions for telco, media, and entertainment industry. Next, we have Mohit Gulati. He's the head of outbound product management for JPAC region for Google. He excels in enterprise SaaS, agile processes, and fintech with expertise in data governance, APIs, and product launch strategies. We have Atul. He's the managing director of Advanced Technology Center for Accenture. He specializes in sales and delivery of major platforms, including Salesforce, Oracle, Workday, and Pega. I would like to thanks all the panelists for taking out time. So to start the discussion, we'll first start with how Edge has been adopted by various enterprises. We have seen traction for the edge computing. If we go back 4 or 5 years back, it was around $500 million revenue for Indian economy, but it is predicted that by next year it would be around $2.7 billion. So we have seen a lot of enterprises adopting edge technology. So we want to start with the discussion around adoption of this. So my first question would be for Ram. So Ram, what is the driving edge computation revolution? So what are the drivers for edge computation, and what according to you are the critical industries which would be impacted by edge computing?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I know this will try to make it as interesting as possible. Not a very interesting topic, but I know we are probably, this panel is between you and the beer, I guess, so we'll try to make it quite quick and rapid in that perspective. So I think the key factor we see from our own industry and in our own company also is the fact around how we have a low latency we're able to achieve on many of the aspects. And the lower latency is very critical in a lot of sectors. I think right from the autonomous vehicles, the cars, where you have to have quick decisions you have to be made. And in healthcare, this is again a very, very significant area where we need to act quickly, or the information needs to be passed on very quickly, not being processed somewhere else and then take a decision and bring back, right? So I think latency is a very, very big factor in this aspect. The other one would be, obviously, I come from a technology and IT background, so obviously the factor is around the bandwidth, saving the bandwidth and or rather making it more efficient is probably another factor which would drive this. And last but probably not the least is the security aspect. So I think we process more and more at the edge, and that's probably going to help us sending lesser data over the networks and then across the seas or across the clouds, so to speak. And I think that's going to help us in terms of the data security and privacy aspects also. So I think those probably the driving factors. And from an industry perspective, part two of the question, I would say it's around, I think, a lot of industry automation aspects come into play, be it ports or manufacturing, defect detection, a lot of areas in the manufacturing or industry setup. Then obviously healthcare is another critical area. And then I'm sure my colleagues can add much more to that.
Thanks, Ram. As Ram talked about low latency, right? That's play a critical role in edge. So Gaurav, just a quick question around this, right? So we know that yes, low latency plays a critical role. So what, as per you, are some of the use cases which can change or change the scenario for if you talk about specifically about Indian economy, how do you feel? What are the key use cases which can be a revolution here?
Thanks, Arjun. So that's a big question, and it's a little bit of being able to foretell the future, but that will obviously rely on our ability to learn from the lessons of the past, right? And to me, the point that somebody made in the previous panel about the cloud being a continuum and not looking at the edge as something different from the cloud makes a lot of sense because we've been there. We started off with the IT revolution with mainframes where we had centralized, decision making, centralized computing. We went to the client server architecture, distributed computing, distributed decision making. Then we came to the cloud again centralized processing and computing, and now we're talking about the edge. But what is the fundamental applications or use cases that are driving the move, right? And you talked about latency. So talking about latency, the first thing we have to realize for the edge is that it relies on human-machine interactions. And human-machine interactions, the network latency has to be within the realm of human latency, right? If you look at how our nerves conduct at a rate of 100 meters per second. So that means if I'm touching something with my hand, it takes 10 milliseconds for that information to be transmitted to my brain for me to be able to figure out whether it's an actual physical object or a virtual object. Now apply this use case to robotic surgery. And if a surgeon somewhere remote is actually operating, the only way you can have him get a real feel if you are able to beat the human neurological experience. And only those use cases will require latency dependent edge infrastructure, right? And we are by all means getting there. We're still, a little distance off. So I think first and foremost, and maybe, as the questions come, we will talk about this, but first and foremost, I think this evolution of the edge has to be considered in light of, the need for distributed computing. Of course, there is also a cost trade-off if you're looking at performance guarantees on the bandwidth, on the latency, and we can talk a little bit as we go through the panel, but just my opening thoughts and some comments on that.
Thanks, Gaurav. I think so. Healthcare, as you mentioned, is one of the critical use case which I think so. Edge can transform it. Yes. If we just deep dive this topic a bit, right? Considering Indian economy is still rural focused, right? So if we think from Indian demographic perspective, how do you think uh, use cases which are enabled by edge would transform the rural sector, right? So maybe Atul, if you want to put in some thoughts, how this would transform the rural part of India.
Yeah, right. Means good afternoon, all, and it's already evening, right? I still recall, I think 26, 28 years back when I used to deploy telco systems in rural areas, right? The phone used to ring, the rotary phone, and the ring itself used to create a lot of noise. People used to get scared. And the sarpanch, the head of the village, used to have one phone. And still remembering deploying, say, 2 channel, 15 subscriber kind of a thing. Things have moved on. We are into a different era now. 1.2 billion connections, mobile connections. The villages, the rural India has what, 531 million subscribers already. Almost 95% of the villages have internet connectivity. So which is good. And if you really see, if I deep dive into 3 areas, right? One, mainly on the education side, we have seen that during lockdown and pandemic, e-learning is very important. So going ahead, I see more AR and VR kind of things coming up. Uh, Immersive, more interactive kind of experience there. Remote patient monitoring will become prevalent. You will have M-Health, E-Health on your mobile at rural areas. That's what I see. And the other thing which typically we see is, say, banking. Again, if you recall the Saukar concept of villages, right? The loaning, the banking, the e-payments, how it will happen. And it will completely change based on the edge computing and the cloud.
Thanks. I think so we have seen the transformation happening in the financial sector
That's right.
with UPIs and all other functionality coming into picture. We have seen rural India changing.
That's
I
right.
hope Edge would also enable that. So moving forward, Andrew wanted to discuss because I wanted to see a global perspective as well, how the edge computing would transform the sector or the nation completely, and what would be the learnings from already developed countries for the emerging countries, and what learnings they can take so that the transformation or journey is smooth.
Yeah, thanks, Arjun. And I agree with Atul. That last mile of telehealth into rural areas is something that the emerging markets need to conquer. The one thing about telehealth, though, too, is that how can we do telehealth in rural areas with a smartphone? We don't need to have specialised devices out in a rural village or something. We should be able to have the power in a smartphone to do diagnostics and send that diagnostics back to a medical centre somewhere. So those types of techs where an edge device can be a commodity device, but still do smart things and send that information back, is one great use case. And the other one you mentioned is point of sale and commerce. Having encryption capabilities in edge devices is really important to keep those financial transactions secure. In some of the other economies that we work in, we see solutions. There's one big telco in Australia. They're actually putting containers into edge devices that are in their business customers. So they have enterprise customers, they have small network devices on the premise of those customers. And by putting containers out on the edge in the customer's premise, they can now spin up extra services for those customers. So this is a way the telco's monetizing additional services by pushing them out to the customer at the edge. Maybe it's a firewall, maybe it's some other application that they can spin up, and they can charge those enterprise customers extra for having those. One other thing I wanted to touch on this topic is, we've been talking about edge for quite a while now. It's been years, I remember, since we started talking edge. And people say to me, well, where is it? Like, why hasn't it come yet? Where's the explosion in edge that we were talking about a few years ago? And I think we're actually on the cusp of that now. And a couple of the things that I think have held us back is obviously the connectivity, right? And we've rolled out 5G now. We're getting those low latencies and the high bandwidth that we need. But the other thing is now, I've just got a new Pixel phone and it has tensor cores built into the device, right? So now we actually have the computing horsepower in these small devices at the edge that can do AI. Like I can generate AI images on my phone. The data doesn't have to be sent back to a data center somewhere and processed and then sent back to me. So that's a whole round trip on the network that we've just eliminated because we can do that in the device at the edge. So I think these are the things that have limited us. The combined efforts of extra bandwidth, lower latency, and now computing horsepower in the palm of our hand, we're really going to see some interesting and innovative solutions coming just from those combination of things.
Yeah, I think so. We are at very exciting times to see all the changes happening. And as you mentioned that yes, 5G, which was launched a couple of years back in India and has seen a lot of changes, both from the enterprise side customers as well as the retail customers as well. So in continuation with that, I want to ask Abhishek. So as Abhishek, you're from Airtel, right? It's now been 2 years, 5G has been launched. So how do you think 5G has played a role in unlocking potential for edge computing? So what's the role for 5G, and also what infrastructure requirements are necessary to have a successful implementation of edge, and what are the challenges from the infrastructure perspective which exist in India?
So I think, as Gaurav said, right, one thing that I pick up, we have to treat edge as an extension of where we otherwise do compute. Right? So if you today stick to, let's say, a hyperscale cloud, you're not going to change everything about your workloads just because you want to move them to the edge, right? Because you're not going to do engineering twice. You're not going to build applications twice. this natural phenomena of how I use compute storage and network somewhere else, which is off-prem, and how would I use this on-prem, that needs to flow seamlessly. I think that's the biggest challenge when you look at design, because now you're looking at storage, you're looking at compute, you're looking at your network design decisioning to solve for the application which is still on the web. When you do that, it becomes extremely difficult to be cost effective, because you're also talking about smaller footprints. You don't get economics of scale, right? Your control plane is still going to take up 20% of the cost, and that now hurts you, because the hyperscalers have convinced you that there is no cost of control plane, right? I think the way that you take this mix of hardware, the security decisions that you take, because you now need to maintain a seamless posture for your application across the locations, your ability to maintain service and run operations on that at edge locations which are sometimes not accessible, sometimes are air gapped for weeks. How do you manage that kind of infrastructure? And we talked a bit about the B2C consumer. But if you look at the B2B consumer, you look at a mining operation, you look at a manufacturing operation, sometimes you don't have access. And they believe in edge because they're forced to do it. So it's a necessity. The first part of your question on 5G, I think very simply you get better bandwidth, you get lower latency, and you get a larger number of devices per sector. That's what 5G gives you, right, in simplicity. I think 5G will enable more wireless edge connectivity. And that is the premise that I want to bring the edge hardware to, saying, can my hardware sit at the edge? Can it now control a larger number of devices for us? So I think for me, those are the challenges. 5G should help. How much it's helped, I don't know. I think that's still early days, but yeah, absolutely. So I think there is connection between the way edge and 5G would come out.
Right. Thanks, Abhishek. You talked about the network, right? So if we think through if we move forward, right? So for edge computing, right, to be more efficient and more adoption of computing, we also would need some skills, right? So from manpower perspective, Ram, how do you think India is in that position, right? Considering in coming few years, is India ready from the skill perspective to support this transformation?
That's a million-dollar question. I guess one thing is what we have seen in the past is we adapt quickly. So are we there in terms of the basic technological skills behind this? Yes, certainly. I think we kind of, most of us in this forum, we have the talent which is building these technologies. So that is very much there. I think in terms of the use cases, that's where we depend on the ecosystem also. And I think that's very much thriving in India at this time. The startup ecosystem is also very much thriving. And I think, like we talked about some of the use cases in terms of the mining sector or the sectors like the windmills, that's another area, right? So we have windmills far out in the rural areas of Maharashtra or in Tamil Nadu and all that. So we are able to reach them. I think the benefits are happening there in terms of uh, the technology is being utilized there. In terms of finding new applications, that's probably is the area where we have to really rely on an ecosystem, not just the technological talent base alone as such.
Thanks, Ram, for the inputs. So we've touched upon how the evolution has been done, what are the requirements, both from the infrastructure perspective, skill perspective. Now, if we talk about consumers, so maybe Atul, a question to you, right? So how does edge computing support enterprises to do data analytics, to find more consumer insights so that we deliver effectively to the customers, right? So what sort of support does edge computing does in domain of data analytics, analyzing data from the customers, and how upcoming technologies like AI, machine learning supporting this?
Right. So if I really use the acronym, right, and I am a telecom person, so I'll use acronyms here. I call it as a ABCD for E. So which is AI as A, B is blockchain. We don't talk about it now, but then it's important. C is cloud, D is data, you touched upon it, and for E is for edge, right? So this is what I'm putting that together. And D coming last in the fourth letter, it's still important, right? And very important there. And I don't know how many projects we execute as enterprises, right, on data for that. So I'll give you two examples there. Mainly, one is a coffee chain. They had a problem in terms of the machine maintenance there, right? The coffee machines there. So they clearly leveraged the edge computing there in terms of all the data was on cloud, it's all digitized. But then how we can have a operational efficiency, just making sure that collect the data from the machine and solve the problem there as part of the edge thing. That's one example. Second example I recall is one of the food chain where everything was on cloud, again, same digitization thing. But then looking into the customer satisfaction or the customer behavior, can I serve a customer when the customer arrives in the store, warm up the food, and it's available, right? So you visit any burger shop or any other shop there, right? So it's all intelligence based on the customer behavior, the persona which was created using data, and how you apply your AI, Gen AI kind of a concept, just to make sure that the client or customer is happy. When he comes, the food is all served there. This is what I see overall.
I think so, yes, the example which you talked about, I think so, a lot of enterprises, they are now utilizing data which is captured by various devices, and then they analyze that on a real-time basis to serve their customer in a real-time basis. I think so.
Yeah,
complete-
if I may
yeah.
add to what he was just mentioning about this consumer
Yeah.
B2C, right? So I think one of the things we are working on is to work with some retailers in France, not in India yet, where we are essentially looking at the grocery store, the large grocery chains, what is the fast moving item, and accordingly we are working on at the edge we are calculating, hey, what's the demand happening in a particular branch of the retailer, so that we can move the inventory out there. Or the other way is that we can jack up the price too, right? Hey, if there's a lot of demand, and I
Those
can see
smart
that.
shelves,
So
they are coming. There are
smart
coming.
shelves, exactly. So I think that's one area clearly on a B2C model.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I think so. In India, from India perspective, I think so. Coming years would see a lot of use cases, specifically on the retail side, which would impact the customer experience and hence deliver for the organizations. So moving on, as we have seen, there's a lot of convergence between edge and cloud. So Mohit, one question to you: what are the benefits and challenges which we have seen in this convergent, and what's the future of our traditional data centers? So how do you think this convergence between edge and cloud would transform data centers in coming years? Yeah.
Um, as Gaurav said earlier, we should look at the cloud and the edge as a continuum, and the lines where the cloud stops and the near edge starts or the far edge starts are continuously getting blurred. Um, all of us probably have a smartphone in our pockets which does facial recognition. We have edge AI in our pockets. Full self-driving cars with Tesla are coming soon with AI in the cars itself. And we see IoT, industrial automation, and implications of that in manufacturing everywhere. So AI and edge is all around us. Talking about the convergence, I think developers and organizations now expect the innovation that hyperscalers are doing in the public cloud to come to the edge. Um, spoke about the skills. So we have hundreds and thousands of developers now in India who are skilled in cloud computing. Uh, we could actually utilize their skills if if they have the same common platform to develop applications on the edge as well. So this convergence is coming. It's probably already here. Um, Talking about data centers, I think the future is definitely hybrid. We are seeing the form factors of a typical multi-rack data center getting compressed and condensed. Um, at Google, we have a product called Google Distributed Cloud Air Gapped. We've built a form factor which is a 40 kilo box, and you can run pre-trained Vertex AI models on it. The US Air Force uses it for predictive maintenance for all of their F-35s on aircraft carriers. So the notion that a data center has to be a multi-rack big room is getting dispelled. You could now have a data center as small as a box as well.
I'm not stealing Mohit's thunder, but we have one at the Airtel booth. You can actually walk over and see a rack sitting which can run as an edge data center even now. So you have it in the middle of 5,000 people. Exhibition cooling is no longer a problem.
I think so. The cooling
That's
was,
how easy it's become now.
Yep,
it was one of
absolutely.
the major challenge. The cooling was one of the major challenge for the data centers, and as you mentioned, Abhishek, it's changing very fast.
I was referring to cooling as a problem today for all of us also.
Right. So, see, we talked about a lot of benefits to the enterprise customers, right? And these edge is collecting a lot of data from the users, right? So, what's your sense, Andrew, around the challenges around edge, specifically if we talk about data security, because a lot of data is being collected. So, how secure the data is, and what sort of precautions the organizations or enterprises are taking to make sure that the data which is collected is secure and there are no breaches?
That's a great question, Arjun. And I'm sure Abhishek has something to say about the security side as well. But from my perspective and what we see with our customers is edge solutions just need to start like any other solution in the data center with security like woven into the fabric of the whole solution. So that means, you know, if you have an edge device, the hardware needs to be secure to prevent tampering. If you have an operating system, whatever that operating system may be, Linux or whatever, it needs to be a hardened operating system. You know, you need to think about the hardware. A lot of people start prototyping on Raspberry Pis or things like that. Is that really secure? Would you be putting that in a production environment? Probably not. So the whole way through the chain, I mean, as Mohit mentioned, like, you know, the data center is not just, or the cloud is not necessarily in the data center anymore, but the security needs to go all the way through. The encryption needs to start at the edge and go all the way through back to the core. And that means the devices need to factor in, well, I need to generate keys. They need to be strong keys. So I need to have enough capability at the edge to be able to generate keys, do end-to-end encryption, as well as manage all the security side of things. So building that into your container platform, building that into the operating system, building that into the hardware platform, it just needs to be like any other production rollout in the data center, I would say.
And also, so data security is one thing. So what about, do you want to also talk something about the environment? So is how edge computing is impacting our environment in terms of sustainability, because more and more devices are being now used. So how is it impacting our environment, or how will it?
Yeah, no, that's another a great point. And I have presented on sustainability because, again, a lot of our customers are asking us that, how do we reduce power? And, you know, when we're looking at edge solutions, it's often at scale, you know, massive scale. We're talking about like thousands and hundreds of thousands of devices. If you think of the RAN, for instance, as an edge, that's one example. So reducing power at the edge can be critical to reducing power overall and the costs and the sustainability of an organisation. So, you know, we're looking at smart ways of monitoring. How can you spin things down? You know, we're working with companies, you know, like Intel, for instance, definitely looking at this and how they can make cores go into hibernation and how they can spin them back up with P states and C states and things like that. So there's a big focus in the industry on building lower power devices and being able to save costs and increase sustainability through this. So it's definitely, and from our perspective, we do it in operating systems and we do it in container platforms, as in, you know, I don't have much workload, now I can go to sleep, or now that workload picks up, particularly in a network, I need to spin up again. The challenge is doing that at very low latencies in a network. You know, that can be a challenge, and that's why it's not an easy problem to solve. But it's definitely something that everybody's focused on in the industry at the moment.
I think so, yeah.
I think that's a very fascinating aspect. You know, so one of my colleagues was joking about that, like the power bill of what Jeff Bezos and Satya and Sundar, they pay for the data centers is being transferred to us now because we are doing edge computing, so we're not going all the way to data centers of those guys. So we're running all the computes on our machines. We are charging at our homes and offices. So it's kind of and the scale is good, as you rightly said. The scale is scary, right? Because so many devices around the world. So the consumption is going to be higher. So all the more important, how do we have devices which are much more smart in terms of a lower power consumption and at the same time be efficient in terms of the edge computing also.
I think so. Efficiency would be one of the critical factor, right?
Absolutely,
How green
absolutely.
our edge network is very would be very critical, right? So we have discussed like how the adoption has been increasing for edge computing. So Gaurav, any advice for the organizations or enterprises who are yet to start their journey to the edge?
Yeah, so anybody who's faced long distance relationship challenges any time in their life would understand the relationship between the edge and the cloud, right?
Yeah.
Not enough bandwidth, low latency, et cetera, et cetera. So I think more than advice to companies that have not started their edge computing journey, I think more importantly is to actually propose a new paradigm for how edge computing can become mainstream. I think infra providers like Airtel and us are probably play a pivotal role because as infra providers, we are trying to now move up the value chain to become outcome providers. And so infra plus control kind of gives us the capability to have global reach, but with contextualized services. So anybody who is looking and thinking about developing microservices or edge-based use cases should think in terms of contextualized services. Just to take an example or a leaf from our playbook, IBUS has been the equivalent of the big telcos for the indoor environment, whereas the Airtels and of course the Geos and the Vodas focus on the outdoors. And we've been laying a lot of physical infra for wiring up connectivity within large commercial real estate and for the last 14 years. And then about 2 years ago, we realized that we needed to do more in terms of being able to offer. And so you brought up energy management as a potential use case that could be delivered from the edge. And that's what we're doing for two specific segments within our customer base where we are using edge processing capability to entirely manage their energy consumption across their corporate tech parks, multiple buildings, multiple campuses, right? So those are the kind of things that, that's the paradigm, I think, for a new kind of service provider that needs to emerge, right? Where, we find out some synergies between access and context, right?
Thanks for those insights. So moving on, so Abhishek, one thing which I wanted to check with you. So we have seen it's in last 4 years, 5 years, a lot of transformation happening in this domain. How do you see next 2, 3 years playing in this domain? How edge computing would change? And specifically, if you want to talk about those sectors which are not yet impacted by edge, how do you see the roadmap for the coming few years?
Okay. So I think the number of devices is increasing, right, at a massive pace. These devices are generating data, which means we can now make better decisions. And our ability to make better decisions is always limited with the amount of compute that you have available, right? And where do you have this compute? When I talk about edge, I look at two sort of metrics, right, that we need to solve for. We need to solve for the experience or the outcome, and we always have to solve for TCO. So if I look at these two problems, any manufacturing setup which will start creating a lot or generating a lot of data and will use this data for analytics and better decision making, we'll have both these metrics to go after, saying, can I improve the efficiency of that compute? Can I find faster decision making at the edge, right? And can I bring my cost down by not transmitting all of this data back to the cloud, making that decision coming back down, right? So I think if you use these two metrics, manufacturing, we will see a lot of use cases come up. Healthcare, we will see a lot of use cases come up. disconnected edge, right? IoT setups, private IoT at ports, we will see a lot of use cases come up. So I think as long as you keep these two lenses, and this is the way that we look at it, saying whichever industry segment solves for these two use cases will have a high requirement of connected as well as disconnected edge compute.
And Abhishek, how do you see India when you compare it with other geographies? Like in this journey, has it been successful, or is it in a right direction, as maybe developed countries would have been in this domain?
So the direction is definitely right. I think we've we've had several successful POCs across industries. So I think that's definitely something that I do see. I see challenges at scaling because your edge device needs to be upgraded sometimes. The application needs to be upgraded. Uh, we're traditionally a wired connected edge, right? If you are already wired and you've already done that investment, the CFO is going to ask you for payback before you can really go to the next step, right? So even if you have a successful POC, you don't get the funds to go ahead and do this. So I think the entire ecosystem of device, connectivity, infrastructure, solutioning, and application
Yeah,
have to come together,
yeah.
and then we will see this really scale, right? Are we behind? Yes. Are we significantly behind? No. That's the way that I would want to put it.
Thanks, Abhishek. One personal question from my side. So, will automatic cars be successful in India, or will it be a dream for us? Self-drive cars.
I hope it's successful.
So cloud-driven cars, I think more importantly in India, and we did some preliminary research, and there is a lot more edge processing capability. Let's just leave it at that. That is needed to fix the issue of autonomous driving. Forget about autonomous driving. Driving in India in itself is.
You need a lot of data processing, right? It's not looking left or right or looking forward or backward. You have to look up also in India, right? So autonomous car, yeah, let's see. Hoping for the best.
Thanks. So, any questions from the audience before we wind this up? Anyone? Any questions for the panelists? Or sir, any closing remarks from your side on this topic, and then we can conclude. Any closing remarks?
I'd just like to say, watch this space. I think it's a rapidly evolving area, and while maybe it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of progress in the past few years, I think that will change quickly.
Thank you. If you don't have any questions, so I think so we can wrap it up. Yeah, we have a question.
Hi. So basically, we have seen in blockchain and all these different technologies, crypto and everything involves a lot of energy. I just want to understand, increasing the cloud space does also involve a lot of energy, and how sustainable we are in terms of this whole cloud networking. If anyone can answer that one, because sustainability is something which we associate with all this technology, and a lot of power and all water and everything is required to run those particular servers. How we can have a kind of a situation where we can balance these two things, where we can grow also and where we can sustainably grow rather. That's my question.
Yeah, that's a really good question and a tough one. I think we were making really good progress with sustainability, and then AI came along. And everybody's power bills went through the roof. Well, the people who are training models anyway. I think the key is going to be the silicon, the CPUs and GPUs, and building those to be more power efficient. We're already seeing like some innovations. It's early days, but in changing the whole design of silicon to be more power efficient. As I mentioned, P states and C states and things like that. I think that's going to be key there to reduce power. But yeah, definitely in the era of AI, we're using more power. The other thing is, how do we generate power more cleanly? So we may still use the power, but we're not generating it through, carbon, by consuming carbon.
I'll cheekily talk a little bit of commercial for my organization. So I come from Qualcomm. So one of the factors we really give importance is to ensure that what are the products we are making is going to be super, super power efficient. So that's one of the driving factors for us. It's not just how fast the Snapdragon platform is processing data, but at the same time, it's also being power efficient. So I think multiple ways, as you rightly said, how the silicon is going to process the whole thing, how we also manage the power, alternate methods of power and all the aspects that come together. So it's not just one shot, multiple aspects have to come together.
Thank you. Any further questions? I think so. Thanks everyone for taking out time and sharing your experience. It was a great session. Thank you. Thank you.